A Dream in Red Mansions. Translated by Paul McCoard and Yuting. Chapter 2. Hearing the summons of the magistrate's messengers outside, Wright hurried to the door, wreathed in smiles, and asked what they wanted. "Tell Mr. Truth to step outside right now!" they shouted. Wright's smile became more ingratiating as he calmed hearing this. "I'm not Truth, but my brother-in-law's name is Truth. He left home to become a priest more than a year ago. I believe he's the one you want." "Truth or false, it's all the same to us," declared the messengers. "But as you're his brother-in-law, you'd better come along with us to see the magistrate and explain things to him." And they dragged him off, leaving the entire household in a state of bewilderment. It wasn't until 10 o'clock when Wright returned, smiling. Everyone was curious and forced him to tell them everything despite the late hour. Our new magistrate is called Swank False. He used to be an acquaintance of Hidden some years ago. He thought Hidden must have moved here when he saw Lucky in the doorway buying threads. That's why he sent the messengers here. I explained what had happened to Hidden, and he seemed very disturbed. Then he asked me about Mercy. I said she was lost during the Lantern Festival. He responded, "I will send people out to look for her. We shall have her back in no time." Then we chatted a bit longer about random topics. Before I left, he gave me $800. Early the next day, Swank sent a messenger to deliver 2 envelopes of cash and other gifts for Mrs. Truth as a way of showing condolences, along with a confidential letter for Wright requesting him to ask Mrs. Truth for Lucky's hand as Swank's concubine. Wright was thrilled to all ends, and eager to adulate Swank, he implored his sister to accept immediately. That very night, Lucky was carried off to Swank's place in a small carriage. Swank was pleased to have the maid of his desires as his concubine. For a reward, he sent 2 envelopes of cash to Wright, together with many more gifts for Mrs. Truth to have her take care of herself while he was searching for her daughter. Lucky was the maid who had turned back to look at Swank on that hot day when he was visiting Hidden. She could hardly have guessed what wonderful fortune she had gained by simply looking back at a man who would procure for her. Not even a year had passed when she gave birth to a son, and Swank's wife died shortly after. Lucky was thus promoted from concubine to wife. When Swank received the gift of money from Hidden, he had left for the capital on the 16th of August, the day right after the Moon Festival, to avoid further personal favors being asked by Hidden. He had done well in the official examination, then unexpectedly did well in the final imperial interview, and eventually, after practicing as a candidate for a couple years, he now had been promoted to the magistracy of this district. However, while his talent was extraordinary, he was not only harsh and overbearing with his subordinates, but also arrogant towards his superiors. In less than 2 years, an unfavorable report was sent by a senior official with a grudge, stating, "His abilities presented were no more than a scheming mask for gaining fame, and has allied himself with powerful local gangs that have caused social instability under his guidance." The Emperor was furious. Swank's instant dismissal was commanded, and all the local officials celebrated once the notice had arrived. But Swank, in spite of all the shame and humiliation that he felt, allowed no sign of anger to appear on his face. Instead, he joked and smiled as always, knowing this would at least dampen the partying occurring at his expense. When the business of transitioning to the new magistrate was completed, he took all his family members and the savings he had accrued during his years of office and settled them all safely in his hometown. After that, he set off on his own on an extended tour of the famous sites in the country, pausing occasionally to attempt a connection by tutoring an official's children. One day it happened that Swank had traveled back to where his fortunes began, Eden. He heard that Apollo Wood had recently been named Chancellor of the province. Apollo was born in a well-educated family, and was therefore obliged to make his way up through the government positions. However, as lucky as he was in his career, there was not much luck with producing children. The fates seemed to decide he should have no son. His wife, who had been a Miss False, had given him a daughter named Bijou, now 9 years old. Both parents pampered her, and because she showed exceptionally high intelligence, they chose to give her an education equal to that of boys. Swank caught a severe illness while visiting Eden, which took him over a month to slowly recover. Now, short of money, he was looking around for some easy work for income while also resting. He chanced to run into 2 old friends who were acquainted with the new chancellor. They had heard he was looking for a suitable instructor for his daughter. Upon their recommendation, Swank was given the job. After an uneventful year, tragedy struck the Wood family. Apollo's wife became ill and died suddenly. Bijou had helped with the nursing throughout her mother's illness and mourned bitterly after her death. Worried he wouldn't receive any salary during this time, Swank was considering resigning. Apollo declined to accept the resignation and kept him on in order not to interrupt his daughter's education with the assurance that Swank would still be paid. But the distressing grief attacked Bijou's already delicate body, which caused her to fail to pursue her lessons for a time. Bored, Swank would go out for a walk whenever it was warm and sunny. One day, he decided to take a walk outside the city walls. Swank strolled aimlessly to a place with tall, standing imported bamboo, ringed with hills and gurgling creeks, with a building half hidden in this grotto. It was a run-down temple with a board above the gate announcing the temple's name and a description. The Temple of Wisdom. The more you get, the more you want. No more to take, no way to retreat. The wording is simple, Swank reflected, yet the sentiment is quite clever. It might be worth going in and inquiring why. Perhaps I can find someone smart to explain. As he went inside to look around, there was an ancient, wizened monk cooking gruel. Swank went up to ask him a few questions and discovered the monk to be both deaf and partially blind. His toothless replies were all but unintelligible. Swank walked out in disgust. He decided to enjoy the rest of the day by drinking some wine in a little country inn. As soon as he set foot inside the door of the inn, a man who was drinking at a distant table stood up and went forward to greet him with a broad smile. "Fancy meeting you, Swank!" It was Boreas, an antique dealer whom Swank had met in the capital some years ago. Swank had great admiration for Boreas as a practical man of business, while Boreas, for his part, was drawn by Swank's great learning. Based on this mutual admiration, the two of them had got along greatly. Swank now returned the other's greeting with a pleased smile. "My dear fellow, how long have you been here? What a coincidence to meet you here today." "I went home at the end of last year to spend the New Year's with my family," said Boreas. "Now I'm on my way back to the capital and thought I would visit a friend while spending a couple days here in Eden. I certainly didn't expect to run into you here." Boreas led Swank to his table as he spoke. After more wine and dishes were ordered, the two men then proceeded, between leisurely sips of wine, to relate what each had been doing since their last meeting. "Any news in the capital?" asked Swank. "Not much," replied Boreas, "except perhaps for a very small but unusual event that took place in your own family in Patria." "What makes you say that?" said Swank. "I have no family connections there." "You mean the Falses from Glory Mansion are not your kin? I had thought you were, as you have the same family name." "Oh, you mean them," said Swank with a small smirk. "There are too many factions of my clan to keep up. The Glory branch is, as a matter of fact, related, but since they are so far above us socially, we don't normally claim the connection for fear of offending them. We haven't spoken for so long they may as well not be relations." Boreas sighed. "You shouldn't speak about them in that way, you know. Recently, both the Glory and Peace mansions of the False Estate are in a greatly reduced state compared to what they used to be. The Glory and Peace mansions both seemed to be bursting with life when I traveled there last year. What happened in such a short time? The Peace mansion connecting with the Glory mansion occupies more than half the street. While I didn't see much happening outside the mansions, what I could see over the walls was splendor and everything was humming with life. How on earth could this suggest the family is falling? Boreas laughed mockingly. And you call yourself a scholar? You should know better. The beast with 100 legs takes a long time to fall. Boreas looked at Swank, sighed again, and continued. Indeed, they are not as prosperous as they used to be, though admittedly most people still couldn't hope to compare to them. Currently, the family expenses continue to increase as everyone there, including the servants, lead extravagant lives. They can't, or perhaps refuse, to make any adjustments to living in the current falling economy. Therefore, outwardly, the appearances still look fancy, but inwardly the pressure is getting to them. What's more serious than the finances is that they seem to degenerate from one generation to the next. Surely, said Swank with surprise. But highly cultured households like Peace and Glory would give their children the best upbringing possible. How could they become degenerates, as you say? Allow me to teach you your own family history, then, Boreas said with a bit of a smirk. The first generation was 2 brothers, the elder Duke of Peace and the younger Duke of Glory, hence the name of the 2 mansions. When Duke Peace died, his eldest son Formal inherited his titles and post. After Formal died, the titles and post followed to his son Thor. Nowadays, Thor's only interest is enlightenment to shed his mortal soul in a temple, ignoring the rest of the world around him. Fortunately, he had a son, Quartz, to give his titles and posts. Quartz also has a son named Agave, who is 18 years old now. With Thor not bothering to watch over his household, Quartz has thrown his responsibility to the winds and taken up a life of pleasure. He has turned that Peace mansion upside down, but no one around dares gainsay him. Now let me move on to the Glory mansion. That's where this strange event occurred. When the Duke of Glory died, his eldest son, Faithfalse, inherited his emulance. He married the daughter of Marquis Block, who bore him 2 sons, Thunder and Throne. Faith has been dead for many years, but his senior wife is still alive, now called Lady Matriarch. Apart from the 2 sons, there was also a daughter. The elder son, Thunder, inherited the titles. The second son, Throne, was his grandfather's favorite as he had been mad keen on study ever since he was a child. Therefore, he was granted the post of supernumerary by the emperor for his grandfather's loyalty when the grandfather was dying. From there, Throne rose to the post of undersecretary. Throne's wife is from the Crown family. She bore Throne 3 children. The first one was Pillar. He was already a licensed scholar at the age of 18. Afterwards, he was married and had a son in his early 20s. Unfortunately, he died a year ago from an illness, though the family is rather quiet about it. The second child was a girl right on New Year's Day. What was most remarkable was her last child, who was born unexpectedly. You see, at the moment of his birth, he had a piece of a beautiful jade in his mouth, which had a lot of writing on it. Thus, he was given the name Nephrite as a consequence. Now, tell me if you don't think that is an extraordinary thing. It certainly is, Swank agreed. I wouldn't be surprised to find something strange in the hereditary of that child. Everyone said so, Boreas assured. That's why his grandmother spoils him so much and think he can do no wrong. When he was a little boy, he seemed to only be interested in women's things, rouge, makeup powder, and the like. Throne was very displeased and said Nephrite would only grow up to be a philanderer, and ever since then he hasn't felt much affection for the child. His despair is only increased by his elder son Pillar's death and is exhausting himself to push Nephrite to study as he's set to inherit the family fortune. But it gets even more strange. Nephrite is now 11 years old and incredibly mischievous, yet is extremely quick-witted. You wouldn't find 1 in 100 to match him. He'll say things like, "Girls are made of plants and boys are made of mud. When I'm with girls, I feel fresh and pleasant, but when I am with boys, I feel stupid and nasty." Boreas laughed. "Now isn't that priceless? He'll definitely be a lady killer when he grows up." Swank's face turned severe suddenly and his voice was harsh. "Not so. It's a pity that none of you seem to understand this child's congenital traits. Even his dad has mistaken the boy as a future womanizer. No one looks past the outside appearance." Observing the weighty tone from Swank, Boreas hurriedly asked for an explanation of what he meant. Swank continued. "After I was unceremoniously removed from my post, I traveled through most of our country and saw a few children similar to this Nephrite you describe. I feel pretty certain what type of boy he must be. I find it incredibly disappointing and am annoyed that no one can find an example right in our own capital, such as the Truth family, the mayor of the capital. Perhaps you know who I mean." "Who doesn't?" said Boreas with an expression of realization. "The Truth and the False families have been on very close terms with each other for generations. I've done business with them myself for longer than I'd care to mention." "Last year, when I was traveling in the capital," Swank smiled, "I was recommended for the post of tutor in the Truth household. I could tell at a glance that, although for all the splendor of the appearance, the family is well-mannered and educated. But when I was hired to teach the boy, he gave me more trouble than anyone I tutored before, despite being just a 10-year-old. He was such a joke. He once said, 'I have to have 2 girls to do my lessons with so I can focus, or else I will not be able to remember or understand anything.' And he would often tell his pages, 'The word girl is extremely precious and pure. It is not worthy to enter your vile mouths to be tainted with your halitosis.' There was simply no end to his violence and shenanigans towards the pages. Yet as soon as his lessons were over and he went outside to be with the girls, he became a completely different person, docile and respectful. His father would cane him, but it made no difference. Whenever the pain became too much, he would yell, 'Girls! Girls!' The girls in the family made fun of him and taunted. But his answer was just ludicrous. He'd say, 'I had a theory about easing the pain. I thought that perhaps if I shouted the word girls, it could help numb the agony. I tested it the next time Father beat me, and it worked. So now I have the secret to get through my beatings. I just keep on shouting, girls, girls, girls.' I could not help laughing. But because his grandmother doted on him so much, she was always taking the child's part against me and his father. In the end, I had to hand in my notice. A boy like that will never be able to manage the family estate from falling. However, the girls in that family are all exceptionally bright, which is such a pity as they'll be married to other families when they're older." "The 4 girls in the false household are also very fine," said Boreas. "The eldest girl of throne, Diamond, was chosen for her exceptional virtue and cleverness to be a lady official in the imperial palace. As such, she no longer lives in the mansion. The next in age is called Sapphire. She is the daughter of Sir Thunder by his concubine. Then another daughter of Sir Throne, also a concubine's child, called Ruby. The youngest, Opal, is the younger sister to Mr. Quartz of Peace Mansion. The old lady is very fond of these young girls and keeps them all in her own apartments on the Glory side. They all study together, and I have been told that they are doing very well. The old lady's daughter, who I mentioned earlier, the younger sister of Sir Thunder and Throne, is actually your present employer's wife." Swank clapped his hands with a laugh. "Ha! No wonder Biju's speech and deportment are so far ahead of ordinary children. I always knew that there must have been something remarkable about the mother for Bijou to be so gifted. Now knowing that she is related to the Falses, it all makes sense. Swink paused, then said casually, though I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but last month the mother passed away. Boreas sighed. Fancy her dying so soon. She was the youngest of the three, and the generation before them are all gone, every one. We shall have to see what sort of husbands they manage to find for the younger generation. Yes, indeed, said Swink. You were telling me the descendants of Sir Throne. What about Sir Thunder? Does he have no sons of his own? Well, after the birth of Nephrite, Throne's concubine gave him another son who I don't know the quality of. If you ask me about Sir Thunder, he has a son called Jasper, who's already a young man in his early 20s. He married his own kin, the niece of Throne's wife, Lady Crown, 2 years ago. Holding the rank of a submare by purchase, he's another member of the family who doesn't find responsibility as congenial. Presently, he stays in Glory Mansion to help his Uncle Throne's family affairs. However, since he married this young lady, everyone high and low has joined in praising her, which has him rather put into the shade. She's not only very handsome, but also very shrewd. More than a match among 10,000 men, I can tell you. Like I said, Swink laughed, no one looks past the outside appearance. All right, Boreas said joyfully. Enough talk about others. Let's order another round of drinks. I'm afraid I've drunk quite a lot while we were busy talking, Swink declined. Boreas laughed again. There's nothing better than good gossip about others' affairs to make the wine go down. I'm sure an extra cup won't do us any harm. Swink glanced out the window. It's getting late. Why don't we continue after we enter the city? Boreas agreed. Right after the two men settled the bill and were ready to leave, a voice called out from behind. Swink, congratulations! I've got some good news for you.